So the three of us are here at this conference because we have sort of day jobs that cause us to need to be here, maybe not necessarily be on stage, but certainly cause us to want to be here and learn. I'm a consultant who has the opportunity to advise education organizations as well as EdTech companies. Stacey, you're the Director of Partnership, or Research, sorry, Yep. Director of Research at the National Education Association, the largest teachers union in the US. And Ben, you're the co-founder of EdTech Insiders, who we got to enjoy yesterday on stage here with easily the most rousing performance of the conference. As well, you work for Common Sense Media in their venture fund area. But we all have sort of night jobs or night responsibilities that sort of describe us specifically to this topic about policy. Speaking for myself, I'm a retired superintendent, having been the superintendent of Menlo Park City School District in the Bay Area of California. Stacey, tell us a little bit about what brings you to this particular stage on policy as well.
Thanks, Eric. So one thing that I do in my role at NEA is I'm helping staff our member task force on artificial intelligence in education. So we've been working with a group of members for the last 9 months or so, looking deeply at AI and helping develop NEA's policy statement on artificial intelligence, which will be out later this year, hopefully.
Terrific. Wow. We will be very excited to see that policy. Ben, what about you?
Hi everyone, Ben Kornell here. In 2021, I sold the company I was leading, and like anyone who was looking for more time, I decided to run for school board. So, elected school board member, I was appointed in 2021 when half the board quit during COVID, and then in 2022 got elected. And San Carlos is a school district in the California Bay Area. We have California's first charter school in our district. Don Shalvey was the superintendent, who's a well-known education and technology leader. And we have a school board of 5, and the terms are 4 years. And so we're dealing a lot with the practical implications of AI in the classroom.
And so because we all need to be using AI, I entered into AI chatbot, a 3 people walk into a bar joke, right?
Okay.
So a superintendent, a teacher union leader, and a school board member walk into a bar, finish the joke AI, and you can imagine the fun responses that I got. But I want to talk about the role of policy, particularly local policy at the school district or CMA or charter management organization level. Whose job is it to keep students and educators safe from the potential downsides of AI, many of which we've talked about over the course of the last several days? And are districts and organizations right to be shutting down ChatGPT and not letting kids access it right now?
Well, I think it's everyone's job, honestly, and it's, a lot of it comes back to just building AI literacy for students and educators and administrators and families. And so right now we're in this phase where this technology, especially generative AI, is very new. People aren't really sure what it does, how it does it, the data it uses, the implications for it in the classroom. And so I think everyone's really in a learning phase. But in the end, I think what needs to happen, and we were talking about this backstage, is that there has to be a set of principles or guidelines that AI is implemented in line with. We know that this is changing moment to moment. I'm sure out in the convention center, there are organizations that are about to release brand new products. They're going to do brand new things. So we need to make sure that there are a set of guidelines around transparency, around data privacy, around how these tools are used, especially in terms of high stakes decision making. And so we want to make sure that employment decisions, student matriculation decisions aren't made only by an AI tool. And to get to your last question, I don't think that the answer right now is to ban things outright, but really just to take a critical eye at how these tools can be used and be very clear with students and with families about when it makes sense to use them and when it does not make sense to use them.
Yeah, so, as somebody who works deeply in AI, I get a lot of questions on the school board. How are we implementing AI and how are we leveraging this new technology? And I think one of the most important things to realize is AI is yet another tool in the evolution of technology that we've been trying to understand how best to leverage for kids, for learning in a way that's safe and responsible. And so while a lot of the features and capabilities are new, this is actually something that we've dealt with for a long, long time. And it's up to us to set guardrails, guidelines, like we mentioned, but it's also important that we create the zone for experimentation and learning. And so I think the tone that a school board can set is either one of fear or of one of discovery and learning. And in San Carlos, we decided we want to be a learning district, not just for the children, but for our educators as well. And so creating the guardrails, some constraints, some learning objectives, and then also I think focusing instead of on the AI or on the tool itself, focusing on learning outcomes. So one that we're particularly excited about is assessment, which is prone for bias. SAT, ACT, prone for bias without AI. So understanding human-in-the-loop assessment, how might we better provide concrete feedback to students in under 24 hours on any writing assignment at our middle school? So when you construct more concrete use cases, I think you can inspire action, and then you've got to create those learning cycles that feed up to board policy. But I will say, right now it feels like we're in one of those old Western movies where we're riding the horse and we're trying to jump onto the train, and except in this case, it's a bullet train. And so the rate of change of technology, I think we've reached a new level of acceleration. And as much as I love AI and most of my professional life is spent thinking about new technology, I actually think it's a good time to wait and see for school districts. If you adopted new technology, new ChatGPT enabled capabilities a year ago, and you spent all the time and energy to roll it out, you're probably regretting that decision now, because every 6 months, there are leaps forward in terms of what the AI can do, what the tools can do, and so on. So we're intentionally taking an experimentation and learn mode, but not implement and scale mode. And I think that's appropriate given the rate of change.
And I think what a lot of people in this room probably understand, but not everybody understands, is how slowly school systems tend to work in terms of policy. And a lot of times the impact follows the policy, right? This is a really unique situation, sort of a transformative time where the technology is really forcing the policy. And so let's take a look. I'd love to understand what you feel is sort of the current state of the technology and how that impacts how we think about technology. So in my own experience as a superintendent, I see some limited use cases where AI can really be impactful, particularly student-facing. I see many more use cases at the adult-facing level, and I see that's where a lot of the engagement is happening. We see a lot, pockets of exploration happening, as we talked about in the adult-facing things, and kids certainly are aware of AI. They're using AI in their social media. They're using it at home. They're not necessarily using it at school. And adults seem worried but willing, right? The adults in the classroom seem worried and willing, but they want some direction. And so I think they're waiting for the legacy players and policymakers to sort of give us some direction. And Stacey, you talked about the fact that the NEA this summer is going to be coming out with some policy guidelines. And I know that's probably something you can't share the details of just yet. But where do you see the policy and technology relationship right now? Where do you see those use cases that really inspire your enthusiasm? And then how should policy follow?
Yeah, well, and I think one thing I'll note is that NEA also represents folks working in higher education. And so we're actually seeing a lot more of it rolling out in higher education. I was talking to a faculty member the other day who said that he had gotten the nicest, "I'm so sorry I wasn't in class" email he had ever seen. And he was like, wow, the student really took a lot of time. And then started getting versions of that email over and over and over again. So we're starting to see it in this sort of kind of low stakes context. And I've had a number of friends reach out to me and ask, how do I handle this with my students in the classroom? And a lot of that's in higher ed. But in K-12, we're seeing kind of a mix. Within our task force, we have some folks who are tech leaders in their district, computer science teachers who have been using this technology, are very excited about it, have developed processes with their students to help them understand the boundaries of when it makes sense to use generative AI and when they should not be using it. But then we also have a number of members who came to our task force not ever having used this sort of technology before. And so we're really in the phase in terms of educators in a learning phase. We've been doing a lot of engagements with NEA members throughout the spring, including not only teachers, but also our education support professionals, so paraeducators and other sorts of folks. And people are really eager to learn. We have packed rooms every time we do this. We've got a lot of really experienced educators who are eager to figure out how this can work for them. But like you said, Erik, I think a lot of it is adult facing. So we're seeing a lot of lesson planning tools, a lot of I can alter a test question to meet student interest, like that kind of stuff. We have not yet seen as much in terms of the student-facing implementation beyond some of the writing evaluation tools and some tutoring chatbot sorts of things. So, but I think it's coming, and I think Ben's right that caution should be taken in implementing these things, and that the learning cycle needs to be there. One thing that our task force has discussed a lot is that folks should not be implementing tools without some sort of evidence that they are going to enhance the educational experience, or a plan to gather evidence and see if it's actually enhancing the educational experience. Like we definitely want to caution people away from, this is the shiny new object, I need it in my school, because that is not a healthy approach, but really looking at the evidence.
Yeah, I just echoing some of that, I think about what, how, and when. What is really, where does the AI intersect with real use cases where there's real needs? So 5 areas that we're excited about are assessment. It's both moving from summative to formative. It's around efficiency. It's around the types of feedback you can get. Second, we're excited about teacher efficiency overall. How can we take some of the lift off of being an educator from an administrator standpoint and free up their time to work more directly with learners? On the direct student facing, we're very excited about learner practice. So, if you go to a gym, you might have a session with a trainer where you learn new exercises and new workouts, but then you've got to go and do your reps. AI is really good at the reps. It's not so good at teaching the novel concepts. So reading practice, writing practice, math practice, that's where we're excited about AI. Fourth is around data infrastructure and interoperability. Right now, in our district alone, we have 134 different data dashboards. We're a K-8 district. Making sense of that data and turning it into action is an impossibility. And AI is quite good at translating divergent data sets into a holistic picture of a learner. And fifth, school-home connection. And I actually think this is an area that's underappreciated, but we send out 5 newsletters every week to parents. And if you're an English language learner, you're also getting all those newsletters in Spanish as well, or your native language. How might you create an interface where there's interoperability, where a parent can say, when is my student-teacher conference? What is the date that I drop off my student? So that's the what. The how, I think we have to think about rolling this out differently. We need to pair the technical change with adaptive change. The technical change is actually the easy part. It's the new behaviors, new mindsets, new implementation. And so what we're seeing a lot is, here's a task I do. Now I'm going to add AI on it and have 20% more efficiency. That really short changes what's possible here in this moment. So we're working on, as part of our learning culture, how do we build in the adaptive muscle? And then the question is when. So I just said there's a little bit of a wait and see. A lot of people here will be familiar with the Rogers adoption curve, where you have innovators and early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. In our schools, early majority does not exist. That's because for 20, 30 years, it's been hard. If you want to be an early majority innovator, that means you need every year to have professional development support to grow your craft over time. We tend to incentivize a more barbell system where the innovators, you do you. Whatever you want, great. And the laggards, here's the compliance, here's the floor, here's the minimum. And so we don't have that middle zone that really crosses the chasm. So for us, the win is now. And what that looks like for a laggard teacher who is reluctant to use technology, and laggard has a very negative overtone, but there's a way in which what they've been doing might be working. We try to think about what's the bite-sized nugget that they can use that is in their zone of proximal development from where they are. Whereas the innovators, it's lead our PLC, help drive the understanding of our use cases. So in terms of what, when, and how, I think we're really excited about where we're going. I think the consternation is that the technology is evolving so quickly, it is creating this need to actually have an adaptive mindset at a district and even board level. And so we're almost acting like a startup where we're pivoting, we're nimble, we're looking at our guidelines, we're constantly refreshing, being agile. And that's a muscle that most governance teams don't have, especially in the highly politicized nature of school boards today.
So AI has a unique role in sort of the zeitgeist of our society today. And there's a lot of fear in the media around what will come of AI. And of course, the two of you in your respective roles have a lot of knowledge about AI as it currently exists, but most school board members and most teachers do not. And so the fear is, I mean, it's real, it's palpable because people don't understand what to be afraid of and what not to be afraid of. And in the absence of clear guidance in the form of policy, that fear continues to exist. And so my question for you is, they talk a lot about, and I'm sure a lot of folks in the audience have heard about this stoplight analogy, right? That the green light is, those use cases where AI is like super fine, it's totally okay. Yellow is yes, use AI, but use it with caution. And then red is we really don't want to go there yet, right? So short of like the zombie or the robot apocalypse, I wonder if you might talk a little bit about where do you assign some red lights in your work, and where you think those red lights should maybe be reflected in the policies that we create?
Yeah, I think I already mentioned, one of the red lights we're definitely looking at is anything that is a determinative high stakes decision. So, certainly there's a role for AI in assessment. There have been some interesting tools in terms of teacher observations and evaluations, but we don't want a situation where the decision about whether or not to retain an employee is solely an AI-based decision. This gets back to needing humans in the loop throughout. Like, there are contextual things that AI can never know, especially about a student. If you're the educator, the community that the student lives in, the student's interactions in the classroom, you might know if they have a learning disability. And AI, you can code that, but you don't know the intricacies of how that learning disability plays out in the classroom. And so we don't want a situation where a decision about what classes a student takes or whether or not they graduate or other sorts of things are determined solely by an AI-based system. We want to make sure that humans are always involved in the loop in those sorts of matters.
Ben?
So I think there's a paradigm where fear is something to be solved, concern is something to be addressed. We should actually listen to the fear. And I think that will actually help guide us to the green light versus the red light use cases. What happens when your sixth grader has their first sexual experience with an AI chatbot? What happens when an eighth grader decides they'd rather not go to school because they've created an AI world where they have AI sycophants that are giving them the feedback loops that they so desperately seek? We are on an arc of technology that has been building on Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone since the 80s, which is basically our technology is making a more and more isolated and more lonely generation decade after decade. And so this is not new to AI. And I think there's a real need for us to understand what are those fears, what are those concerns, and how do we actually call them out and acknowledge them and say it's okay to be afraid or worried about those things. So my general view is that when things are getting in the way of human and social interconnectivity, that is a hard red light. And school as an engine, it's about learning, but let's remember it's about childcare, it's about social connection, and about learning in that order. And so anytime that we see that the technology getting in the way of human-to-human interaction, that for our board is a red light.
Terrific. Well, that brings us to the end of our gripping discussion. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about policy, particularly local policy, with the two of you. And we wish you all the best of luck in your respective contexts in developing policy that both inspires innovation, prepares students for the future, but also keeps our students and staff safe from the downsides that not just this technology, but all technology has in store. Thank you.